Someone slipped a USB drive into my truck cab. When I opened it, I almost called the cops. I'm a night driver for a regional delivery company, clocking in the graveyard shifts, hauling freight across the same monotonous routes week after week. It's a solitary gig, endless stretches of highway, flickering truck stop neon, and the occasional radio static to keep me company. I know every bump, every exit, every shadowy corner where fatigue likes to creep in. Last week, though, something shattered that routine. I pulled into my usual rest stop around midnight for a quick bathroom break and a coffee refill. The lot was mostly empty, just a few rigs idling under the harsh sodium lights. I locked the cab, as always, and headed inside. When I returned, climbing back into the driver's seat, I noticed it immediately. A small USB drive perched on the dashboard, right next to my thermos. Silver casing, cheap looking, with a single red sticker slapped on the side. No logo, no writing. My first thought was a coworker pulling a prank. We've got a few jokers in the fleet who'd think it funny to leave random junk. Or maybe it fell out of my pocket. But no, I don't carry USBs. There was no note, no fingerprints smudged on the surface. Just this anonymous little device staring back at me. I pocketed it, figuring I'd check it later, and hit the road again. The engine's roar drowning out my unease. Curiosity gnawed at me the whole drive home. By the time I pulled into my driveway at dawn, I couldn't resist. I dug out an old laptop from the garage, the one I use for junk, in case of viruses, and plugged in the drive. It mounted without issue, revealing a single folder labeled play_me in all caps. Inside were 6 video files, each named with a date spanning back 3 years. No thumbnails, just stark timestamps. My pulse quickened. This didn't feel like a prank anymore. I double-clicked the first one, dated exactly 3 years prior to my hire date. The video flickered to life. A dashcam recording, grainy but clear enough. It was from inside a truck cab identical to mine. Same model, same worn leather seats, same company logo on the dash. But it wasn't my truck. The route was familiar, though. The very one I drive every night through those winding rural back roads. The driver, a middle-aged guy with a scruffy beard, pulled over to the shoulder, hazards flashing. A woman stood by the roadside, waving him down, stranded, her car smoking in the ditch. He leaned over, opened the passenger door, and she climbed in, grateful and chatty. They talked for a few minutes. Weather, directions, small talk. She laughed at something he said. Then, without warning, the recording glitched, static lines ripping across the screen for a split second. When it cleared, the woman was gone. Vanished. The passenger door hadn't budged. No one had exited. But the driver kept glancing at the empty seat, nodding as if in conversation, his lips moving silently. The video ended abruptly. Shaken, I opened the next file. Same driver, same route, a week later. This time, he was laughing heartily, slapping the steering wheel like he'd heard the best joke. But the seat beside him, empty. No one there. The videos progressed like that, arguing in thin air, his voice rising in frustration over some unseen dispute, crying softly, wiping tears while murmuring apologies to a phantom passenger. Each one built this eerie narrative of isolation turning to delusion, or something worse. The 5th video ramped up the dread. The driver was parked at a rest stop, similar to mine, eating a sandwich. He turned to the empty seat, offering a bite as if sharing with a companion. Then, in the rearview mirror's reflection, a faint shadow flickered, tall, indistinct, gone in a blink. He didn't notice, but I rewound it a dozen times, chills racing down my spine. The last video stopped my heart cold. It wasn't dashcam footage anymore. This was from inside my truck, angled from the back of the cab, hidden somehow. The timestamp, 2 nights ago, 3:14 a.m. I recognized the scene immediately. I'd pulled over for a power nap in a lady, exhausted from the long haul. On screen, I was slumped in the sleeper berth, snoring softly, oblivious. Shadows danced from passing headlights, but then something moved deliberately in the darkness behind me. Tall, slow, human-shaped, it glided closer, features obscured in the low light. It paused, as if watching me sleep, then reached out with a pale hand. It lifted the USB drive, the very one I was holding now, and placed it gently on the dashboard. The video cut out. I never woke up. My skin crawled. How had this been filmed? Who, or what, had been in my truck? I sat there, staring at the screen, the room suddenly feeling too small, too quiet. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. I couldn't shake it off, so I showed the footage to my supervisor the next day, playing it on that same laptop in his cramped office. He watched in silence, his face draining of color with each video. When it ended, he leaned back, rubbing his temples. He confessed, the previous driver on my route had quit abruptly 3 years ago, ranting about a persistent passenger that followed him everywhere, invisible but always there. Accidents started happening, minor at first, then escalating. The company hushed it up, chalked it to burnout, and reassigned the truck without a word. No investigations, no reports. I'm not quitting. Jobs like this are hard to come by, and I've got bills to pay. But tonight, I'm driving with the cabin light blazing full blast, every corner illuminated, and the dashcam repositioned to point squarely behind me, recording every shadow, every whisper of movement. If that passenger shows up again, I'll be ready. Or at least, that's what I tell myself.